Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu analysis for today. Before we start with the articles, again a reminder, Byjus Exam Prep IAS now has an exclusive channel on Telegram. Do join in to get all the current affairs updates on the Telegram channel of Byjus Exam Prep IAS. The next article that we have here is about the infamous Bilkis Bano case in Gujarat, as we have discussed this earlier as well, and you would have also read this in the newspapers throughout the country. 11 men who were sentenced to life imprisonment in 2008 for the charges of gang rape of Bilkis Bano in 2002 were recently released from a jail in Gujarat. This has brought to light the remission policy of the state of Gujarat. Why is it that people who have been convicted of such heinous crimes are also covered under this policy, and is there a loophole that needs to be fulfilled? The author here is saying that at a time that India is trying to improve its image around the world, especially when it comes to women's rights, having such an incident, not just remitting the imprisonment, but the kind of welcome that these people actually had after they were released from the jail, that actually speaks very, very badly for our society. If you would have seen in the newspapers and on the news media, these people who were released from the jail were welcomed by the villagers, by garlands, by flowers. They were celebrated at a time when the victim, that is Bilkis Bano, lives in the same village where these people would actually now go back. This does not augur well for the overall society, as per the author of this article here. As we have discussed earlier as well, the people in the jail were released under Gujarat's remission policy. And this has got the remission policy of Gujarat into a lot of debate and discussion. Now, we'll be discussing in detail what exactly is the remission policy of the state of Gujarat and what role did the government and the Supreme Court have to play in this. Now, as you know, remission means the state government having the power to cut down on the jail sentence of the prisoners. Now, the fact is that there are two remission policies of the state of Gujarat. One, the old one that was in 1992, and the one that was actually revised later on in the year 2014. In simple terms, in order to understand this debate here, the debate is which of these policies will apply to the people whose crime was in the year 2002 and whose punishment was given in 2008. While the 1992 policy says that any prisoner who has been imprisoned for life can actually apply for remission, the 2014 policy is actually more strict, in the sense that the 2014 policy says that the people who have been convicted of heinous crimes such as rape or crime against women, they will not be considered for remission. So the entire debate here was which of these two policies will apply to these people. They were obviously arguing that the 1992 policy should apply to them because the punishment and the crime, both of them, were actually before 2014. And this has what brought the matter into the news. Now, if you look at the laws in India, the state governments across the country have their own policies on remission, which are the people that they will remit, which are the people that they would not consider for remissions. Also, the reason why they have this kind of a power is because prison is a state subject as per the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Now, as I said, each state follows its own procedure. However, the sad part is there is very, very little transparency on how these decisions are actually made. Meaning that a change in government would mean that a lot other people will be released as compared to the earlier governments. And that happens across the country. Usually in Indian polity, we read about the pardoning powers of governor, pardoning powers of the president, but those powers are separate. The state's power to give remission is specifically because the prison is a state subject altogether. Also, there has been a debate about whether or not getting remission is a right of the prisoner or not. The CRPC says that if a person who has been jailed for life has spent at least 14 years in jail, then he or she can apply for remission. Now the question is, let's assume someone has spent over 14 years in jail. Does it mean that the person now has a right to be released? The answer is no. The person has a right to apply for remission. And then on a case by case basis, that case will be taken up. There are different states that have given different procedures, Mostly commissions are formed where there are senior police officers, there is some people from the judiciary also that is involved, but it is not compulsory that for every remission request, remission will be granted. It is a right to be heard, but not a right of remission to be given to these men in all the cases. Now let's go beyond the article and focus a bit on the Gujarat remission policy, which is in the debate. As I said, their release was mainly as per the 1992 remission policy that came up on the 9th of July 1992. It says that anyone who has served 14 years in jail would be eligible to apply for remission. If such an application will be given, Inspector General of Police will start the process of the life convicts even when they have completed 13 years only, because 1 year is taken for all these proceedings to go on. They will form a committee. The committee will have the district police officer, the district magistrate, chairman of the jail, and other members in the advisory committee. They will then discuss whether or not the conduct of the person in the prison was fine, whether or not the person deserves to actually be let go or not. After that, the government of the state will take a call on that matter. Now, the Gujarat government's policy of 1992 was very, very broad. It did not have any exceptions, and that is why Supreme Court, in multiple cases, told the Gujarat state that you can't have such a broad policy. You have to specifically tell which are the people who can ask for remission and which are the people who are not eligible for remission. And that is how a new policy came up in Jan 2014. In Jan 2014, this policy that is in force today specifically says that the government will not grant remission to prisoners convicted for a crime that were investigated by the CBI. Second, the prisoners convicted for murder with rape or gang rape will also not be given remission. In this Bilkis Bano case, both these things were actually satisfied. The case was investigated by the CBI only. The prisoners were in the prison for the crime of gang rape, but the reason why they were actually given remission was that 1992 policy was used and not the present one. Now, before you start giving all the blame to the state government, let's actually see who is responsible for this outcome. It's actually half of the role that is played by the Supreme Court and half of it is done by the state government. So one of the 11 people who are in the jail for this crime actually approached the Supreme Court in March this year, saying that we want to apply for remission and old policy of 1992 should apply because our crime was before 2014. The state government of Gujarat earlier had not taken up the application. Because if you look at the history of the case, what had happened was when this case was being heard in a court in Gujarat, Bilkis Bano in fact went to the Supreme Court and said that I will not get justice in Gujarat, please transfer this case. So Supreme Court had actually transferred the case to Maharashtra, and the entire Bilkis Bano case was actually heard in Maharashtra and not Gujarat. So Gujarat government had said we will not take up the application for remission, send it to Maharashtra, Maharashtra will consider it. However, the Supreme Court asked that the Gujarat government should be the one to take up this application because it is in their territory that the crime took place. Not just this, the Supreme Court specifically said that the application of remission should be considered under 1992 policy. And now that the Supreme Court has given the freedom to use a 1992 policy, it is obvious that the state government would let these people go. Now, this is about the present case and the background of that. Connected to that is a question that many people have been asking in the past week in India. As a society, are we actually allowing women to live with dignity or not? As a society, are we going in the right direction to give enough freedom to the women or not? The International Gender Gap Index doesn't really suggest that. The Global Gender Gap Index that we see of 2022 itself ranked India at 135th position out of 146 countries in terms of the quality of life of women in the country. As you can see, our rank in most of these parameters is very, very bad. Political empowerment being an exception because all women have the right to vote. All women can actually stand in elections. We also have reservation of seats for women in municipalities and panchayats. But apart from that, all other parameters is where India has to work really, really hard. The next article that we have is based on a very, very small village in Tripura. The village is called Sarkhipara. Now, in this entire article, there is a lot of story of the local village, how the people actually deal with the lack of electricity. So we'll not focus on that. What we'll focus on is that there are villages in the country that are in very, very remote areas and still do not have electricity supply, and how exactly the government of India is trying to push solar energy for the welfare of these villagers. Now, this particular village, the Sarkhipara, actually has Riangs as the residents. As you know, Riangs are a group of scheduled tribes. They have been in the news specifically because of the conflict between multiple states in the northeast part of the country. Most of the people that live in this village are Riangs. They do not have any electricity supply. Now, when you do not have electricity supply, there are a lot of issues that you can actually face. Health, education, quality of life, all these are entirely dependent on whether or not you actually have a permanent electricity connection or not. The article says that the state government of Tripura set up the Tripura Renewable Energy Development Agency, whose responsibility was to adopt renewable energy projects in Tripura, especially in these parts where the electricity supply does not exist. Under this, finally, there were some solar lighting projects that were actually set up in very, very far off villages, such as the Sarkhipara village that we're actually talking about. Sarkhipara village now has a solar plant that was installed about a year ago. The villagers are extremely happy, so much so that many people who had actually gone out of the village are now coming back. The author here says that a 2 kilowatt power solar plant can actually provide 7 to 8 hours of power for the basic needs of 15 families. Now, you might say out of 24 hours, if they're just getting electricity for 7 to 8 hours, that is not enough. But think of it from the point of view of those who never actually had electricity. For them, even to get electricity for 7 to 8 hours is a huge, huge improvement. A big part also was played by schemes such as the PM Kusum Yojana that we will discuss, under which the government of India has been giving a push to adoption of solar energy by farmers in the agricultural field. Also, this has been a game changer since most of the villagers are dependent on agriculture. The problem with agriculture is that since you don't have a water body nearby, you are dependent on extracting water from the ground. Now, for that, you obviously require motors, you require electricity. In absence of electricity, that could not happen. Under the PM Kusum scheme, a lot of water pumps were also installed, that were solar water pumps, which has reduced the dependence of the farmers of Tripura on the monsoon rains, because of which a lot of other kinds of developments have taken place. Usually, for these kind of schemes, the central government gives 50% of the cost, state government gives 30%, while the local person on whose field the solar pump is being installed is required to give 20%. But because they are so poor, they were not really asked to give any money, and it was the Tripura government and NABARD that actually put up the entire cost, which has changed the entire life of this village. Now, PM Kusum Yojana, as you can see, is not a very new scheme. It's a scheme that has been going on for a few years now. The major objective is to ensure solar water pumps are distributed amongst the farmers, number one, so that the pumps that they use to extract water are run by solar energy. The second objective is that if some farmers have barren field, for example, if they have fields that are not good enough for electricity, that are not really cultivable, on those fields, the farmers are encouraged to actually install these solar panels so that they can generate their own electricity. And if they generate extra electricity, the government discoms will actually buy them. The government will buy them and they will actually earn extra money. All this is a component of the PM Kusum Yojana. Let me share the other details of the PM Kusum scheme with you. It is launched by Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, as I said, to support off-grid solar pumps. Off-grid means the ones that are not connected to the main electricity line. It actually encourages the farmers to ensure that they set up their own solar panels ground mounted. If they have field which they are not using for agriculture purposes, they are also looking to install solar powered agricultural pumps, and also some of them that are grid connected. Grid connected means they are connected with the main electricity supply. The scheme will benefit the farmers in a lot of ways. It will help the discoms also, that is the electricity distribution companies. they have to give a lot of subsidy to the farmers, so their burden will reduce. It will help the state government with their finances. It will help the farmers to earn extra income. And obviously, since we are using solar energy, it is very, very beneficial for the environment as well. This is an important infographic that shows you how much progress we have made specifically in the field of solar. There are multiple renewable energy sources, solar, wind, biomass, but the one area in which India has progressed leaps and bounds is actually solar energy. As you can see here, India now is the fourth largest producer of solar energy in the entire world after countries such as China, USA, and Japan. The next article that we have here is about an Indian team and many other nations across the world who are in New York right now. They are discussing a kind of an international agreement with the purpose of conserving marine biodiversity in the high sea. Now, what is high sea? High sea means that part of the water around the world that does not come under territorial zone of any country. So no country has actually any claims to that water. That will be called the high sea. If you look at the entire Earth's surface, 45% of the Earth's surface is actually just high sea. Now you might say that we already have a kind of a treaty. Remember UN clause, United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea, that actually tells how long will be the EEZ, how long will be territorial zone, so on and so forth. But the problem is EEZ is not binding. Different nations such as China, US, etc., they misuse it, giving their own interpretation of UN clause. That is why now the nations across the world are trying to actually come together to form a legally binding instrument so that this problem of the navies facing each other or fight between who will actually have the right to resources, that can be resolved. This is also important because a lot of multinational billionaire companies across the world are looking for mineral resources under the water. They are looking for gas hydrates. You would have heard the name methane hydrate if you remember. Methane hydrate sources are usually found underneath the sea. Then there are precious metals, fossil fuels, etc., that are found in the high sea by many companies, and the fight always is who will own these resources. The government of India, anyways, even before this, has been working towards exploring these resources. The government has already approved the Blue Economy Policy, which is about 4,000 crore program of 5 years. This will mainly be for developing those kind of vessels which can go underground and explore the resources from deep water as well. Now, UN clause is something that remains in the news, and it is also something that the UPSC asks time and time again. As you know, UN clause stands for United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It is based in Jamaica. It came into being in 1982, specifically to identify how much area, for example, let's say if this is the southern border of India. Now, how much area into the water will actually be called Indian area? If a resource is found here, then would it be Indian resource? If a resource is found here, would it be Indian resource or not? How will that be decided? That is how the UN clause came into being. It identifies 4 types of zones: territorial waters, contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, continental shelf. I'm sure about continental shelf you have read in your geography. Let's discuss about the other 3. So if this is a baseline, this is where our coastline actually ends. First 12 nautical miles is territorial sea. 24 nautical miles is called the contiguous zone, and 200 nautical miles is exclusive economic zone. Please remember, this is all nautical mile and not just miles. This is nautical mile. This is how the distance in the sea is actually calculated. Now, what is the difference between the 3? You would have heard mostly about exclusive economic zone. Exclusive economic zone means till this point of time, whatever is actually found, any mineral that is found, is India's mineral resources. No one has any claim to it. That is what China has been saying in the South China Sea. They say that entire South China Sea in terms of exclusive economic zone will be their territory only. So the first 12 nautical miles is territorial water. This is where the country has its own sovereignty and jurisdiction. So for example, let's say in these 12 nautical miles, if a ship is going, let's say an Italian ship, US, China, because it is Indian water, they have to take permission from us. Because it is our water, so they have to take permission from us. Then the second one is called contiguous zone. This is up to 24 nautical miles from the baseline. This is a zone where the country has the right to both prevent and punish infringement of immigration, custom laws, etc. However, in this zone, jurisdiction is only on the surface and floor. So, in this zone, if a ship is coming, they have to take permission. But in this zone, if a flight is going, then they don't have to take permission, because this is the air of this particular place is not in Indian control. For territorial sea, for the ships also, and for the airplanes also, they'll have to take permission. But for contagious zone, only ships will have to take permission. After that, the EEZ, for navigation purposes, any country can go. There is no restriction on that. However, the right to explore minerals, to exploit what is present on the seabed in EEZ is with India and those countries only. This is the concept of the EEZ, and that is the entire fight for the South China Sea, because China, what they are doing is, if this is, let's say, the entire South China Sea, what they are doing is they are building artificial islands. Let's say they build an artificial island over here, and then China builds artificial island over here, and then they build one over here. So they say for every island calculate 200 nautical miles, and this is our area. So just by building artificial islands in the middle of nowhere in the South China Sea, they're actually claiming the entire South China Sea as their own exclusive economic zone, and this is what the fight is. Talking of China, the next article is on China only. This is because recently our External Affairs Minister Shri S. Jaishankar made a comment when he was addressing an audience in Bangkok, where he said, India-China relations are right now in an extremely difficult phase, and there are many reasons for both the countries to work together. China responded saying that we are hopeful that India and China will work in the same direction to restore their ties. Now, we all know since the 2020 Galwan clashes, the two countries have not had a great time. We have not had any success in resolving the border dispute, even though more than 2 years have actually passed. Our external minister said that it will be difficult for the Asian century to happen if India and China could not come together. Asian century actually is a phrase that is used around the world, which means that the last few centuries were the European century. They were the powerhouses of the world. They were the ones ruling over the world. They were the ones driving forward the industrial revolution. Now the expectation is the next century will be the Asian century. That is, the drivers of the growth now for the entire world will be the Asian countries now. It's a very commonly used phrase. So Mr. S. Jaishankar and the Chinese Foreign Minister also, both of them said, until India and China, both of them progress together, the Asian century will not become a reality. Now, this is not an article where a lot of details are given. However, I wanted to discuss this to actually bring your attention to one very important aspect of international relations. Understand this. Relationship between any two nations, India, China, India, US, are never the same on every front. For example, you might say India, US have had a very friendly relation for many, many years now. But did you know that in between these years, USA has gone to WTO against India time and time again? They have filed many complaints to the WTO against India. Similarly, when it comes to climate change summits, US and India are always against each other. On the other hand, on political terms, they have great relations. On defense, they have great relations. But when it comes to these international forums, their friendship actually turns south. Opposite is true with China. Yes, India and China do not see eye to eye on most of these issues, but there are some issues on which the two sides actually have worked together considerably. I'll share with you two examples, the WTO and the climate change deals. The reason is that in both of these platforms, there is a division between developing and the developed nations. India and China, both of them consider themselves as developing nations. In fact, they are the ones who are considered as an unspoken leader of the developing world. When it comes to the topic of food subsidy, how much food subsidy, how much agriculture subsidy the government can give to their farmers, China and India usually are on the same page. When it comes to climate change, whether developed nations should cut down the emission or developing nations should cut down on the emission, India and China are usually on the same page. It is then the developed versus the developing nations. So even today, to say that we do not have any common area of cooperation would be wrong. We do have some common area where the two sides can come together and collaborate, and maybe confidence building measures in those areas can then translate to resolving other issues on the border as well. These were the important articles on the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one. Common grounds such as climate change can lead to the revival of strained India China ties. Do you agree? Elaborate. Second, discuss in detail some of the initiatives of the Union government for giving a push to the expansion of solar power in India. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good day ahead.